You described him as a young 13-year-old, I think, when we last talked. Did you see, again, this was a kid that was kind of living on the streets and with Marines and other folks that are in the services, kind of living a tough life. Did you see more of the kid come out of him?
I think so. He could not have had a better home situation than he had with the host family here in East Lansing. Just a wonderful, wonderful family. And he was nurtured. And he grew in many ways while he was here, but he never lost the kid part in him. You know, he always wanted to play sports. He always wanted to be playing baseball or basketball or soccer, and he's very competitive. But then in some other things, you know, he's really, if he was an American child, I would say, you know, he's pretty naive.
Charles, do you think that this did something for the communities? I mean, from where he's from and coming here, do you think that this kid sort of was a bridge?
I think it was, because a lot of the kids here really couldn't have experienced anything that he experienced. And I'm sure none of the kids where he's from experienced anything like what he experienced. And so they probably were living his life through him from over here. And then the kids over here were living his life through him over here. And so they, you know, watching his story and seeing all the stuff that he got to do, they were going, wow, you know.
Doctor, what about at the hospital? I mean, was he just a kid going through some other surgeries to everybody there?
No, the nurses and everybody in the hospital was so tuned in. They were all so tuned into his story and knew how special it was and everything that happened to his dad and so forth. They just took extra special, tender, loving care of him, and they were so excited for him that he could be here and get these improvements that he got and so forth. And they were just kind of overwhelmed by the whole experience. And he's just one of those kids he's Mr. Personality Plus, and everybody loves taking care of him. And if you could have 6 kids like him, every family in the country would have 6 kids, I'll tell you.
And that was one of the things that we heard when you talked to people. And when I first met with you, long before I ever met Mohammed, you said, wait till you meet him. He's quite a kid. And everybody that I had met that had met him before I met him said the same thing. What do you think there was about him, is about him? Well,
first thing was his fluency in English. That broke a lot of barriers right there. And just the fact that you know, the sweetness about him. I know that every time we went to Dr. Lannigan's office, the nurses there, you know, were just giving him hugs and things like that, which back in his own country, you know, would never occur. And but I think Dr. Lannigan's right. When people found out his situation and found out his life story and how much he and his brothers and sisters and his mother, you know, had suffered, I think there was just an outpouring of goodwill.
Well, and this was a child whose father was killed by terrorists, uncle was killed by terrorists, living under some pretty tough situations. But all through this, I never heard any talk of anger or hate or any of those kinds of things. How come?
I think he compartmentalized it. He did talk about it a few times at home, and especially when as the months went by and it became apparent that that he was going to be returning back to Iraq, he started to talk a little bit more about some of the dangers that he had faced. In the beginning, he talked a lot about the Marines who had been taking care of him before I came along, and I knew that what he was saying, it was genuine and real, because he was talking in the same manner that Marines talk.
So I mean, a lot of people befriended him over there long before he ever came back over here. Isn't that true?
That's true. He had been allowed access at a combat outpost that was run by the Marine Corps, and he had a lot of contact with Marines and soldiers, but he had not had contact with, you know, American children and women from this country and that kind of thing.
We'll be back after this.